Tim, how are you?
I am well today. How are you,
I'm
Elliot?
doing well, man. As you can see in the backdrop, I'm in Maui. So we have a rule here. There's no complaining while in, about, or anything when we're in Maui. So I
That's a
have
good
to be
rule.
good.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, you just caught me with what you said offline about leadership and these crazy times we're in, and I want to get into that. But first, a little intro for you. I almost want to skip it over, and this is why I was telling you that I try not to do too much research, because I would just skip it over if I
Yeah.
knew about already. So, you were in the leadership field, yes,
Yep.
and you've been able to work with some of the greats, right? Like John Maxwell. We were talking offline, who probably is a top five GOAT in this
Yeah.
industry
Yeah.
of all time, right? So, I relate everything to sports. So, the term GOAT. Um,
That's right.
Man, how did you get into this field? What pulled you here?
Yeah, good question. Well, our work at Growing Leaders is really targeted at the emerging generation of leaders. So I started as a teacher and as a part-time youth pastor way back in the day, more than 40 years ago. But in 1983, right when I had finished college, I went on staff with John Maxwell. So
Okay.
that was before he was really famous, before he'd written a bunch of books. And my love of young people and my love of leadership got married. I began to see what a profound difference it would make for a person who's 16 or 24 to learn these timeless principles and not wait till they're 48 or 55 and have ruined a marriage and two companies and something else, So my goal is to get these timeless leadership principles in the hands of the young, and so they can just accelerate what they're called to do. So that's what I'm about.
That's our job, right? Is to sprinkle as older people, and I'm getting there.
Yeah.
My birthday is actually in 8 days. All right, yeah, I'm gonna get a
All right.
birthday in
Happy
8 days.
birthday.
Thank you. It's to sprinkle some of this luck dust on as many people as possible is one of the things that I like to say, which is just give them some, I don't know, some cheat codes, right? Some cheat
Yes.
codes
Yeah.
to this game.
Yeah, no doubt
What?
about it. In fact, I feel like those advantages come when we do learn something. Maybe it's tucked away, but there'll be a moment it's going to be necessary, and we're going to be prepared because we've learned something.
Right. And sometimes those moments can really suck, right? I think that's sometimes, for me, that can be the hardest part with leadership is when you start to figure it out a little bit, like, okay, you're a leader, yada yada, right? And but you still have those hard moments, and those hard moments still coming up for you, where it's time for you to sit back and learn. I know that sometimes when in the beginning of those moments, I can be like, God damn it, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Well, I tell you what, the genesis of this last book, The 8 Paradoxes of Great Leadership, happened in a green room where this very topic came up. I was sitting back there before the event, and there were 16 CEOs together, and I decided to turn it into a sort of a focus group. So I tossed out the question, do you all think that leading people today is harder than it was when you first learned to lead people, like back in your 20s or something? And every single leader, Elliot, said absolutely harder today. And I pushed back on that. I said, well, wouldn't you think it'd be harder back when you were younger and didn't know as much? But everybody stuck to their guns. They said, no, it's harder today. And that just set me on a hunt to find out, why is it harder today? And there's a number of reasons, but we live in a day that corporate America calls VUCA, V-U-C-A. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that defines the day we live post-pandemic. So I just felt like there's got to be a trick to this thing. And I think part of the trick is some emotional intelligence that we need to learn that allows us to practice paradoxes, things that shouldn't go together, but they got to go together in order to navigate the troubled times we're in.
I mean, when were you sitting in this room with these CEOs?
Well, it was right before the pandemic. So it wasn't even, we hadn't even been hit with COVID
So yeah,
yet.
we weren't even really fucked up. We were just a little messed up.
That's exactly right. This was the good old days, 2019.
This was BC.
So, and of course it just got crazy, the last couple of years. Everybody it's been said a million times. But I just believe the answer isn't necessarily better, I don't know, organization or better strategy. Maybe that would help. I think it's delicately understanding that I've got to read people before I lead people. And that means I'm practicing social and emotional intelligence, where I see maybe my team member needs confidence from me in this moment, but humility from me in that moment. So I found 8 of these paradoxes, and that's been kind of the impetus of the book.
Yeah, we're going to get into it in a minute. But so you graduate from college, right? And you're 20 something, you're on Maxwell's team. What was that experience like?
Oh my gosh. It was like drinking water from a fire hydrant. So you'll enjoy this, Elliot, since you know John a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember my very first performance review. You know, I'd been with him for a little while. And
what were you doing? Sorry.
What was I doing?
With him? Yeah,
I was overseeing. I was overseeing a number of departments. And so I was both a teacher and one of the pastors on staff at his church.
Okay.
So, and of course, John was already very much bigger than life, even though he had not gotten, largely famous. He was just, his personality is just big.
Right. Just right. Big.
So we sit down together, and John says, "Now, Tim, I want to, give you a little bit of an evaluation." And he proceeds to list 7 things that he really thought I was doing well. So I start taking notes, I'm writing this down, and then he says, "Now there's a few things you're going to need to work on." And I leaned in and said, "Beg your pardon?" I don't think anybody had ever told me that I had to work on something before. I mean, I believe my mother. I was awesome, So John proceeds to give me 3 things that I did not do well.
Okay.
And I look back and I think, oh my gosh, thanks for the grace that he gave me, that he said it delicately, not punitively, but he told me to work on something. Well, let me give you an example. He said,
"I want to cut you off for 1 second. I use the mother joke as well. Like, no, you're not special, regardless of what your mother told you."
That's right. That's exactly right.
So go ahead.
So one of the things that John told me I had to work on was off the platform charisma.
What's that?
So, and what he meant by that was, when I'm speaking on the stage, man, I'm just on, and I do enjoy it. He said, but when you walk off the platform, it's like you turn the button off, you just want to curl up with a book and be alone. And it's true. I kind of do want to curl up with a book alone. But I began to wonder, how do I build that? And John said, "Just watch me." And of course, I watched him, and he's so good. The other 23 hours of the day that he's not speaking, where he's just meeting people and, supporting them and loving on them and hugging them. And I saw what you do as a leader the other 23 hours of the day. So anyway, that was just one of my early learning points from Maxwell that I have always looked back and appreciated.
That sounds like something that I've always been told is, you are the person that your children think you are. Because you can't lie in between the 4 walls of your house, right?
Like, that's so true.
So you're doing that, and then what came next for you in your career? Like, what was the next stage or section of it?
Yeah. So John Maxwell ended up leaving the pastorate and really just running his company and the nonprofit he started. And John called me and asked, "Would you be willing to travel with me to Atlanta and help lead Equip," which is one of his nonprofits. So we all moved from Southern California to Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I still live. Okay. And we started the work in Atlanta, great hub to fly out of with Delta Airlines. But it was with my work with Equip and with John that I began to really see what I want to focus on is the next generation. I mean, I love training adult leaders, and I get to do that all the time in companies and sports teams. But I just feel like I owe it to the generation behind me to give them these tools that John was so good to pass on to me. And so here, I think you'll enjoy this. John, teaches the 21 laws of leadership and the 17 laws of teamwork. I don't know one young person that's looking for another law in their life. So we teach with the images, conversations, and experiences. So every one of our principles is summarized by an image. In fact, I've got 2 of them behind me right here.
I was going to ask you about them. Okay.
This one off to your left is called Rivers and Floods. And it's all about focus. Think about rivers and floods. Floods are water going in every direction and doing damage. Rivers are flowing in a single direction. And if you leverage them well, you can use them for a lot of good. You can use them for transportation and so forth. So we just believe that people tend to be a flood or river, and we want to help people find their God-given river and flow rather than flood in 17 directions. But that would be a simple way for a high school kid or a college kid to learn about focus rather than a lecture. It's a picture.
And how about the other one?
The other one's called Bit Market. Oh, this is a fun one. By the way, I hung these two pictures behind me because they're the ones I need the most, Elliot.
Okay.
I desperately need it. So this is about leading change. Here's the story behind the Bit Market. Brand new president of an electric drill company. First day on the job, he's meeting all the staff and VPs. At the end of the day, there's a meeting where the vice presidents can brag about how great this company is. They were selling so many drill bits, they were sure their future was bright. The president stepped up to the podium after they were done, smiled, and said, "Gentlemen, thank you for those speeches. Those were great speeches." But then this is what he said next. "You're just forgetting one important thing. There's no market for drill bits. The market is for holes. And the moment someone comes up with a better way to make a hole, drill bits will be obsolete." So they had confused the method with a mission, the product with a purpose. And that's what leaders do all the time. So we got to keep our eye on the hole, not the drill bit. Drill bits come and go. The hole is what we need to figure out the best way to drill.
What's the problem?
It's about
the problem is I
change.
need a hole. I need a hole. That's what I need. That's what I need you to solve. So
exactly right.
Who cares about the drill bit, right? Like, because that's not the problem I'm solving.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We need to fall in love with problems to solve, not ideas, because ideas come and go. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, amazing. So you are running Equip now, right? With John.
Well, I'm running Growing Leaders.
Well, now
and we're merging back together. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You moved to Atlanta to run Equip with John, right?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And then you leave at some point here and do Growing Leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason how that happened was, you might remember September 11th, 2001.
I do.
The terrorist attack happened, and so many nonprofits were having to just rethink, what are we going to focus on? And the focus that Equip once had on young leaders, emerging leaders, kind of got taken away, and we just focused on the world, the international world. And it was at that point, Elliot, that I realized how much my heart just went out for the next gen. And I sat down with John and I said, "John, we can't stop doing this young leader thing." And John just smiled and said, "Well, you should start something." Now, he thought it was going to be a side hustle, that I wouldn't, I do part-time, but it ended up being this, crazy thing that just grew and grew and grew. So I don't think I'm a brilliant entrepreneur, but it's been fun to see it grow. And now we get to partner with thousands of schools and organizations and athletic teams around the world. It's fun. Yeah.
What is your calling towards young people so much for, do you think? Like, everyone has a calling and look, if you have a calling towards they're great. Every right, and one's not better than the other, right?
That's right.
But you definitely seem to really have this calling towards young people. Where do you think that came from?
I think it's probably matters more than I think it's issues more than I realize, but let me give you the logical reasons I chose this. One, if you think about change down through world history, whenever change happens, it's almost always young people that are at the part of that initial change, the protests that had to happen, or the abolition of slavery or civil rights or whatever. It's often young adults, not 58-year-olds that are leading the charge. So that was one. Number two,
how old are you?
I am 62 now years old. Yeah.
So, but that's your generation who normally pushes back on these young people, right?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the advantages I have, I was just yesterday in Las Vegas with a whole bunch of athletic directors of NCAA athletic programs. And I'm talking baby boomer to baby boomer saying, we've got to lead with empathy. We've got to let them take their place, so they're hearing an old white guy talking to a bunch of old guys and gals, but I think I have leverage with them because they realize he's one of us. But I'm saying we've got to let go of the power and we've got to begin to let them take their place. So I think it's all those reasons of change happens with the young. I think the young are moldable. They're still moldable. You get to be 45 or 50 years old and you're much less apt to change your spots. So anyway, there's all kinds of reasons that make me think we've got to invest in the young. They represent our future.
You used a word that's a buzzword these days, empathy.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone uses it. Empathy, vulnerability, authenticity. Right. These are words that we love to hear right now. What does empathy mean to you?
I believe it means that, well, let me just say this. When I express empathy as an older guy, I'm expressing three things. I'm first listening. I think my generation doesn't listen very well. We like to tell, we don't like to listen. But when I listen, as simple as this sounds, the other person feels heard. The next step is empathize. So I listen, then I empathize. When I empathize, they feel understood. Only when I've done those first two steps can I do step three, which is to guide, where I've earned my right to say, you know, you might want to consider XYZ or ABC. So one of our images that we start with middle school kids is called porcupines and koalas. Porcupines and koalas. Think about these two animals here, okay? You know what a porcupine is. That's oh my gosh. It's this rodent basically with, you know, it's got sharp points on it. You know, what do I say? It's sharp point. So you get close to a rodent, this porcupine, and you're going to get hurt because he's going to protect himself. You get close to a koala and you're going to get hugged, you know? So isn't it true? People often tend to lean, if I get close to you, am I going to get hurt? Am I going to get hugged? So we try to start with 12 years old, teaching you got to be the empathizer. You got to be the one that understands someone that's different than you, and lean in, don't lean out, don't be self-protective. So anyway, and we've got ways to teach that with images where they get more complex and more robust with age. Like for instance, I'll give you another one. By the time you reach college, we're talking about guard dogs and guide dogs. So it's another image. Guard dogs and guide dogs are two jobs that we have given to canines, right? The guard dog's job is to protect. He's in a fenced-in area and he's growling and sniffing out trouble and barking at intruders. The guide dog, his job is to partner. He's usually with someone that can't see very well or at all, right? And he's leading the way. He's going first. He's being vulnerable. He's taking initiative. I think leaders in times like we're in tend to be guard dogs. We hold our cards close to our chest. We're self-protective. I think we need to be guide dogs and be vulnerable, take initiative, open up and be transparent. But we tend to be guard dogs. We've got to work to be guide dogs. So those would be two images that illustrate empathy and vulnerability, but they're two completely different, you know, levels of complexity. Yeah.
Explain your difference between empathy and sympathy, because I think a lot of people get this wrong. When we're leading, right? Because you can be very empathetic and not be sympathetic, right? Like, because you know, look, for lack of better words, shit still has to get done. Yeah. Right. Like you still have to like do the work. Like, and if you're not doing the work.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you deal with those differences?
Well, it's a great question. And I've heard at least a dozen different people differentiate between sympathy and empathy. I'm a fan of empathy because I think that's what makes the greater difference, at least for me. I am stepping into the shoes as best I can of that person. And I'm realizing even though we do need to build grit and get the job done, I've got to first understand where they're starting from. So here's a phrase I love to use with leaders. We must build bridges of relationship that can bear the weight of truth. We must build bridges of relationship that are strong enough that can bear the weight of truth. Maybe hard truth. Maybe I need to have a hard conversation with that team member.
I'm stealing it.
Okay.
I'm done. Stealing it. Guys, podcast over. Have a great day, everyone. I'm going to go to the beach.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Wish I was with you.
Yeah. Just because. Go, you explain it. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I just feel like if I have to have a hard conversation with a team member and I have no relationship or very little relationship, good luck with that. You know, they're not going to be receptive. In fact, they maybe jump to a completely wrong conclusion about my judgment. But if I build a relationship, it may not be a fun conversation, but I've earned the right to that relationship. Here's another phrase I love to use. being heard is so close to feeling loved that for the average person, it's almost indistinguishable. And I just don't feel like sometimes young team members just feel like my generation's hearing them very well. And I think that's my way to love them, is to say, let me hear you. Now, you may have a screwy idea that I need to help amend, but I need to start by hearing them.
That's second one's good, but I really like the first one.
Yeah,
I really like the first one. Just because truth can be so difficult sometimes, right? And it can be so painful. Like when you have to speak the truth, or or your version of it, it can still hurt. And it takes a lot of it takes a really strong bridge in your example to
no doubt
be able to handle that with somebody, where you can even give them space to step off of it for a second, right? Like, and then come back on it, and you're still there. So, and hopefully they will be too. So it's a very hard thing to do,
Yes, it is. No doubt about it.
Let's move into the 8 paradoxes here in your book, and what you're seeing, like, and I say this often on this podcast. I believe we have really, really weak male leadership in the world today. Like maybe some of the worst ever. I think we have, and I think it lies on both spectrums. We have actual weak leaders, like actual weakness, and then we have these other people who are screaming how strong they are. And you should follow me because I'm so strong. Look at me. This is what strength looks like. And they're not at all, and I'll never say that I am strong. I don't ever like to say that. That's for everyone else to have their opinion of that, right? Like, I always like to say Tom Brady doesn't walk around wearing, every time you win the Super Bowl, they give you a shirt that says Super Bowl champion. He never wears them. Never. Right? Because everyone knows he's a 7-time Super Bowl champ. Like,
you don't have to tell me.
You don't have to tell me, right? So I think we have both. We have these terribly weak people, and we have these again terribly weak people who are just presenting so strong that it doesn't seem weak.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I look around, and I'll just be honest with you. Again, very many of them are from my generation. And I just feel like we're either, you're right. We pretend we're strong, but it's not what people are needing or wanting. Or like you said, we're just terribly weak. We don't have a backbone or any courage at all to do what needs to be done. I have found myself, not on behalf of all baby boomers, but very often I get with young adults, college and young professionals. I say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the mess we've left you, But the good news is,
fault is it? Like, who else's fault is it, right? Because like if my kids, if I have a 15-year-old that's an asshole, well, that's because I probably let him be an asshole when he was 10, and I probably let him be an asshole when he was 5, and I'm his dad, right? So it's the people raising the young people whose fault this is that these people are assholes.
It's so true. I know. Yeah. Well, and that's why I find, the reason I said what I did, Elliot, is obviously not all baby boomers are evil. There's some great ones.
Sure. Of course. We're generalizing.
Yes. But you're absolutely right. I think we just dropped the ball on passing the baton well, on parenting. Very often we were over-functioning helicopter parents. We've heard that a million times. So I feel like we led out of our own need for, I don't know, accolades or something. I don't know what it is, but now that's why I'm committed to making sure the next gen gets it right.
I think a little bit too, we like with what's happened is like we're taking our child's failure as our failure, even at like a super young age of like, okay, so what, Johnny needs a little extra help in school. And now all of a sudden, like, okay, good, let's go get him the help. Why does this have to be some failure of the parent that that Johnny doesn't read well, or if your kid's not great at soccer, that for some reason this is your like a failure of Johnny's dad, which doesn't make sense to me.
No, you are hitting the nail on the head. This is what we find all the time. I will do a number of parent conferences, and they have so personalized any glitch or failure in their child's life. And you're right. You want to go, hey, it's one exam, no big deal. Or it's one glitch on the playground or whatever. And it just, we have so personalized everything that it's made us bad leaders. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book, The 8 Paradoxes, what are the 8 paradoxes?
Okay. So I gave you one of them. I hinted at it anyway. Paradox number 1 is, I believe uncommon leaders are both confident and humble. Here's my theory. People need a confident leader. I don't think they're going to follow somebody that if they have zero confidence. At the same time, I think they want a leader where they know that confidence doesn't blind me to my own humanity. You know, I don't have all the answers. I'm going to need you. I think we can do it, but we're going to need to do it together. So confidence and humility. I think that's, in fact, here's the way I summarize it, Elliot. I love this statement. My confidence makes my leadership believable, but my humility makes my confidence believable. You follow that?
Yeah.
So when I'm humble, they realize, okay, I'm not smoking something. I'm actually real, you know? So that would be one. Here's another one that I just love. I believe uncommon leaders leverage both their vision and their blind spots. So I have case studies in that chapter where I talk about some of the best leaders in the world had blind spots like we all do, but they ended up using them to their advantage, that they didn't know everything about that new industry they created or that new product
give me an example.
they had no idea. What's that?
Give me an example.
Okay, a great example for this one was Sarah Blakely. So she was the entrepreneur that created shapewear called Spanx. Every woman listening would go, I know Spanx, okay? So she creates this, finds a manufacturer in North Carolina to build this hosiery / girdle type shapewear thing. But she's never gotten into this industry. She didn't know what to do to distribute it. So she ends up making a call, and she gets a 10-minute meeting with an executive at Neiman Marcus department store. Flies over, gets 10 minutes with her, okay? She's talking to her, and 5 minutes into the meeting, Elliot, she realizes, I'm not getting anywhere. This executive has heard 50 pitches today. She is not going to buy anything. So Sarah stands up and says, would you follow me? And the executive says, I beg your pardon? Would you follow me into the restroom? I want to show you. And so they walk into the restroom. Sarah Blakely tries on the Spanx right in front of her there. Well, this sells the product because she sees, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So then what happens next is this executive decides, let's try it out and, say a dozen Neiman Marcus stores. We'll beta test this. So Sarah calls all of her friends who are in those cities, and she says, I'm going to send you some money, buy them out, they get bought out. So Spanx takes off. Now, here's where the blind spot comes in. Months later, Sarah Blakely is speaking to an audience about her startup, and somebody in the audience during the Q&A time raises her hand and says, how did you get noticed in those big trade shows? How did your exhibit get noticed? I mean, there's thousands of exhibitors. And Sarah goes, trade show? I never went to a trade show. I just went straight to the top, and I got a distributor. So the very fact that she didn't know what protocol was launched her into this incredible startup. So Sarah would say, my blind spot, the fact that I didn't know what the heck I was doing, was my best advantage. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure, because everyone else is going to the trade show because that's what you're supposed to do.
Here's what we're supposed to do. Yeah.
And she didn't even make a conscious decision to not go to the trade show.
She didn't know.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
How many
amazing.
times have you heard a leader say, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have never started this thing.
Right.
And
right.
Thank God they did. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right. All right. Back to the 8 paradoxes. Go ahead.
Okay. You want to hear another one?
Mm-hmm.
I believe uncommon leaders balance both their visibility and their invisibility. So you and I both know, if we're growing any group of people or any company, there's a time, especially in the beginning, leaders have to be visible. They can't just make speeches. They need to model the way. Over time, however, that visible leader needs to step away and be invisible so the next gen can step up. So my example on this one was Dr. Martin Luther King. Between 1955 and 1963, he was a very visible civil rights leader. He led marches and protests and boycotts. But after that big speech in 1963, I Have a Dream, he begins to slowly step back and sometimes would not even attend meetings. And a young, leader, might call him up and say, Dr. King, you should be here. And he would go, John Lewis, you know what to say. You're there. You know what? Because Dr. King knew if he was there, they would all defer to him. So there's a time when leaders got to be there, and then there's a time leaders need to step away and not be there so that others can learn to lead. So that was a kind of a simplified explanation of that one, but I think it's key. Sometimes, like I said, we boomers hang on to power way too long, and we need to step away and let the next generation step up.
As we, start to wrap here, how do you build strength? Because I would say that for some of the young generation, there's not a lot of grit going on right now.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to blame all the older people. I'm going to include myself in this, right? Like, we're like, and we'll start with children. We're not making our children do basic things, clean the dishes, cut the grass, like, or we're, I had a neighbor who, look, this person has 3 children, my child's age, and she paid my child to come weed her grass, her yard.
Wow.
And I'm just like, what? And I asked her, she's like, well, my kids won't do it. And I'm like, what do you mean they won't do it?
Yeah.
Like, that's just.
Yeah, you're the parent.
Yeah, you're a parent. Like, my kid gets paid to cut other people's grass, and he cuts my grass because that's what happens. The grass needs to be cut. I don't pay him to cut my grass, So. And that has built grit in my children a little bit, right? Like these things they don't want to do. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, like by any means.
Sure, no,
but
I get it.
How do we build grit in someone who hasn't had grit forced upon them a little bit?
Yeah.
Like I'm probably overboard. I'm probably too much with my kids as a pushback to what's going on. You know?
Yeah. Well, and it's because of what you've seen. You go, I don't want my kids to turn out like that. So I have 2 quick thoughts that might be helpful to listeners. One is one of our habitude images is called the diamond secret. So here's the diamond secret. Most of us know the wives' tales about how diamonds are formed. It's often in a coal mine over years, but it's actually not the coal that turns into a diamond. It's the carbon inside the coal. And carbon obviously can just sit there in that coal for years and never change, or it can endure pressure for long periods of time and be transformed into a beautiful diamond. So it is with us. I think there's a diamond inside of every one of our kids, but it's going to be what they do with the pressure that either turns them into a beautiful diamond or just stresses them out. So we as parents, teachers, and coaches need to say, the problem is not pressure. Actually, pressure is the solution. You will not be the best version of yourself unless you feel pressure. Now, you got to see it right and do something with it. But what you do with it is going to determine whether you're a diamond or a stressed out person when you're 18 years old.
I think a lot of people, oh, sorry, my bad.
No, you go. They got the idea.
I think a lot of people, when they hear, someone like you start to speak, or anybody who has really put some thought into leadership and empathy, vulnerability, and you start being like, man, you're going to make a bunch of bitches because I'm a little more raw, sorry, because you don't want to apply any pressure to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They and I think that's the opposite. Like, no, we're going to apply a lot of pressure, but we first have to build that bridge because they need to know that I'm always going to be standing there with them. Because if they don't trust, it's like the coach-athlete relationship, right? If the athlete doesn't think that the coach is going to stick with it, then the athlete will never do what the coach needs him to do. I can remember.
That's right.
I tell the story. I have this coach. His name is Greg Jackson, and man, he used to take us up to this mountain, in Albuquerque, 14,000 feet, and because I was fighting.
Wow.
And he would take us to the edge of this cliff, where we would have to carry each other up it along the edge.
Wow.
where if you fell, not only did you die, but the person on your back died.
Yeah.
Because he had to get us good with our own death. Because we're going to fight, and you have to get good with death. And I can remember thinking like, man, why am I listening to him?
Yeah.
Like, because if anybody else told me to do this, I would say no.
Yeah.
And he's doing it with a smile. God, Fire Marshal, you're doing so great. I love you, Fire Marshal. And I'm like, you love me? You're getting me real close to never seeing my wife again. Like.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, but there was a lot of pressure there with a lot of love and a lot of trust and a lot of all these other things that you were talking about.
So you were illustrating something that psychologists call learned industriousness. So there's two diagnoses that deal with grit. One is called learned helplessness, and the other is learned industriousness. So learned helplessness is what millions of kids have learned. You described it already. We are so soft on them, and we say, oh, I don't want to put you on pressure. Oh, I don't want to stress you out. So we remove the pressure. Well, they learn helplessness. They go, oh, mom didn't think I can do this. I must not be able to do this. Right. And they learn to be helpless. Learned industriousness happens when we give them a challenge, maybe just enough to stretch them, not overwhelming at 12 or 14, but just enough to stretch them. And we start teaching them, you can power through and get this. So let me tell you where this happened in my house. When my son Jonathan was, 7 years old, he would get up in the morning and I'd see him in the kitchen trying to open the peanut butter jar. And he couldn't get it open. He tried and tried and tried. And I saw him give up. That's learned helplessness. He tried and gave up. And he knew that I would come in and open it up and he'd be fine. Well, I decided one time, I'm not going to open this jar up for him. So he left the kitchen mad because the peanut butter wasn't open. And I snuck in and I loosened it just a little bit, but still required some effort. I said, Jonathan, get back in here. You can do that. Dad, I tried. No, get back in here. He comes back in. He has to work, but he gets it. The moment he sees a little success, I know this sounds cliche, but when you see a little success for effort, your brain says, do it again, do it again, do it again. So learned industriousness is where we as leaders give them a challenge just enough to let them succeed, but they have to work their butt off to get it. Yeah.
It's so powerful. When you see what's possible, it's so powerful. And
yes, it is.
Especially in you, right? When you see that, oh my God, that is there for me.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yep.
I like to ask two questions as we end. This is the only thing that's scripted throughout it. First, I believe everyone has a power. Everyone has this unique superpower that I believe that they give to the world, and then the world and then returns something back to them. It's very balanced. It balances your altruism and your narcissism. What do you think your power is?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is communicating through metaphors, these images.
Yeah.
I feel like when people get a picture in their head, it stays there because we think in pictures. And if it guides them, I've given them a gift. So I think it's communicating through metaphors. Yeah.
Okay, last one. And this is not, please don't take this as me tooting my own horn. In any way. I'm going to deprecate myself actually a little bit. You're going to get nothing out of this podcast as far as like money or somebody working with you or like I'm nobody, right? Like I am no big leader where like this podcast would be like, oh my God, this changed the, growth leaders forever. Yeah. Right. So why did you choose to come on here for an hour? Because like I'm not young, right? I'm 42. I'll be 42 in a week. I don't know how many young people listen to this. It's mostly a little, I guess 25-ish, but mostly middle-aged men. So what'd you waste your time for?
Well, I liked your title. And I think I love the idea of fire. There's an image for you. But I think I also think every time I'm on any kind of podcast like this, I'm thinking it might help either a young person that might be tuning in or the person that leads that young person. So everybody's a candidate to hopefully be helped by one or two of these images, and hopefully can be better for it.
Tim, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed the talk. And because I love the idea of thought leadership, you know, and I'm really trying to move into this space, bridge my, the expertise that I've gained in martial arts and kind of going beyond that, right? I'll never stop teaching martial arts. I love it, but I want more. And this is the field that I want more in. So I appreciate your time. So
my pleasure.
Tell everyone where they can find you, reach out to you, and things like that.
Well, our website is probably the best place, growingleaders.com. Growingleaders.com has these images there and the 8 paradoxes and so forth, or they can go to my personal site, timelmore.com. That's the best place to reach me.
All right, Tim, I appreciate it. Guys, as always, Tim has his unique power and gift that he gives to the world. And I have my unique power and gift that I get to give to the world. Don't go out in the world and try to be Tim. And don't go out in the world and try to be me. Please go out there and find your own power, everyone.